Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Welcome to TSS. All of you who are here in person and to our online people that are watching us through Facebook, through Instagram, and through Twitter. So thank you so much for being here. And today we are going to have Joe doing our lecture. He's going to be talking about the spiritual calling. This is good. And we're going to have Isabella to do the first reading and then Denise to do our prayer, initial prayer. Okay, so thank you so much. And Isabella, please.
Right. Never lose hope. Whatever may happen, keep believing. If everything is against you and failure threatens you with despair, even then expect divine assistance. Only what is best for us happens. The law of God is the law of love, and love can do everything and does do everything. When you think the help will not arrive in time, if you continue hoping, you will happily discover that it reached you minutes before the disaster. The person who despairs has already lost part of the battle he was going to fight and goes forward at his disadvantage.
Hi, everyone. Let's now seek faithfully, close our eyes, elevate our thoughts to our Master Jesus, to the TSS mentors. Let's ask them to open our hearts and our minds for the teachings of today. Let's ask them to enlighten our speaker, Joe, today, and that the message that's going to be transferred touch our hearts and help us and help our colleagues as well. Thank you, and so be it.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Very glad to be here again with the folks who have been here person to person. See some new faces that I don't recognize, which is good. And I'm sure that there are many others watching us either live or maybe on playback later on, so welcome as well. Today I have a challenge. I have to talk about the spiritual calling, and I only have 45 minutes or so to talk about that. We could be talking about 45 hours on this subject. But we had to get through, and I'll try to summarize. And how I decided to do was follow what is provided, obviously, in one of the Kardec books, in this case, The Gospel According to Spiritism. Now we'll focus on two parables, one coming from chapter 18 and the other from chapter 20. And these, for folks who have had study or exposure to the Gospels, you will recognize these stories. They are very common and we hear them a lot. And we'll look into how this was going to be represented or interpreted by this in light of the Spiritist view on the Gospels. So let's get started. Next slide. Okay, so for those who are new to these series of lectures, when they say the Gospel According to Spiritism, this is the book I'm talking about. It's the second of 5 books in the Spiritist codification. And the purpose of this book by Allan Kardec was to explain the moral maxims of Christ in accordance to Spiritism and their applications in the different circumstances of life. So this is the book that we always come back to when we have questions, we have doubts, we have decisions to make in our lives, and we want to understand how best to achieve them, not from a financial physical, material point of view, but more from a spiritual and moral point of view. So it's something that we talk about this very often in these lectures, and it's divided in 28 chapters. And as I said, I'm going to be focusing on 2 of them. Next. So here's a quote that we have from Ananda himself. Unshakable faith is the only kind that can stand face to face with reason in all human ethics. For those who question or have doubts about the Gospels, they believe that it relies too much on pure faith. That we can't make sense of things, and we just have to believe it, and we have to accept that as such. And Allan Kardec was never one to shy away from focusing on the tangible and the scientific in ways to understand what Jesus was trying to tell us in a way that makes sense to us. In his case, nearly what would have been 1,800 years. And so after Christ has left us, and us, we're in the 21st century, so over 2,000 years ago. And this is how he focused all of the citation that we find in the Gospel according to Spiritism. Next slide. As I said, I'm going to be focusing on 2 chapters. Chapter 18, which is called Many Are Called, but Few Are Chosen. And this has sections around the parable of the wedding feast, which is the one that I'm going to be focusing on. Narrow door. And then not all those who say, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. Even though I won't be a lot of details in the other 2 sections, I'll make a few comments on them. So before we start, we could ask ourselves, what does it mean to have a spiritual calling? Is it a calling to be a preacher, to go to a monastery, for example? Is the idea that we're going to be evangelists, knocking door to door, trying to make awareness of the words that we find in the Gospel, the words of Jesus Christ? Is it to start a new church? No, there's no single answer. For each one of us, this spiritual calling is very individual. It is something that we alone can interpret and understand. Don't let anybody else tell you what your spiritual calling should be. Because in reality, who is calling here? Is it God who is calling us? Is it Jesus Christ that's calling us? Maybe, but in fact, they are very patient and they see things in a very big picture. So we know that in our belief that we reincarnate many times. So if the calling doesn't come in this life, it might come in a future life. So who's calling? It's coming from inside. It's a calling that comes within us. And as I said, it could be very different from everyone. 15 or 17 years ago, if you had told me that I would be standing here doing these Spiritist lectures, I would say, nah, probably not. Because I wasn't really prepared at that time. It wasn't my moment yet. But many things happened, and here I am. So is this my spiritual calling? Well, a little bit of it. Because the real spiritual calling is for our own inner transformation. As we understand the reason why we exist, what is expected of us, and how can we really kind of fulfill what's the best that we can do. That is our spiritual calling. And that, once you start in that journey, you never go back. We can have different roles. I might be here in this TSS, doing these lectures, talking to people, educating them, reading lectures and courses. But maybe in 5, 15 years, I'll be doing something else. But nothing changes that I have to pursue my own destiny, my own progress, my own evolution, according to the teachings that we get from Spiritism. So let's look at this first parable. You will remember It's on the next slide. It's called Many are called, but few are chosen. So in this parable, Jesus talks about this king, just like saying that this king is like the kingdom of heaven. He wanted to give his son a wedding feast, like we all like to celebrate the joys of our children. So he sent his servants to invite everyone, right? And then he did all the preparations and tell everyone to come because he has prepared this beautiful feast. He has slaughtered a big cow that's going to be served as the meat. And it's going to be beautiful. Please come to my feast. I'm offering this to my neighbors and my friends. Right? Come to my feast. However, those who were invited didn't really want to go, right? One went on went to their cottage, what they call here the country. The other one was running his business, didn't want to come, right? Others were doing all the nasty things with their servants at the same time. And of course, the king was more than disappointed. He was angry. He was the king, right? He was giving this to all of those in his kingdom. And then he said back to his servants, he said, well, the wedding feast is ready. Nobody has showed up. But I guess I have to assume that those who I invited initially are not really worthy. So go to the streets and invite everyone, not just those that I had invited before. Bring everybody in, right? So that's what they did. They went onto the streets, brought in rich, poor, kind of homeless people into it. So they gathered everybody. There was a bunch of good and bad people. So the wedding hall was filled. Now we had lots of people. So then the king comes in and wants to see who's there, right? And he noticing a man who was not wearing a wedding garment. He said, hey, my friend, why have you come in without a wedding garment? The man didn't say anything. Then the king told his servants, bind his hands and feet and cast him into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of the teeth, for many are called, but few are chosen. And that's Matthew 1:14. Okay, let's see what Jesus was trying to tell us here. So, who were the people that Jesus initially invited to hear what he was trying to teach?
The Jews.
The Jews, right? And what he got from them, especially from the top folks, right? The priests. He got rejected. He was told that he was blasphemy, that nobody would listen to his crazy words. And that was Jesus really wanted. Jesus was a Jewish, right? He was a Jew. So he felt that his first step would be to educate the Jews. After all, they were already believing in a single God, right? And what Jesus was saying was not different to what they had been taught before in the Old Testament, which is bringing new lights into it and trying to make it simpler to understand. Take some of the old stories and replace them with new, more meaningful explanations of what we should be doing. So he said, I'm going to go out and preach to everyone now, which in itself was something that the Jewish community thought that was even a bigger blasphemy, a bigger sin, right? But then what happened? Well, does that mean that everybody else is ready to hear the words of God, the words that Jesus was preaching? Then, no. It's not that the person wasn't dressed well, because if he's collecting people from everyone, the rich and the poor probably can't afford to have what a king would consider a wedding garment. But that's not it. It's not about any material things. So what is the garment that Jesus is talking about? Is the desire to embrace the good news, right? Embrace what Jesus was teaching. And if they're not ready, they're thrown back to where they were before. They're not going to be hurt by physically. They are hurt by missing this opportunity. And I started earlier talking about if we don't have the calling this life, maybe the calling will come in later lives. So this is what he's saying. When he's throwing them back, he's saying, you're not ready, right? Everyone is called for this spiritual calling, but few are chosen. And again, who is choosing what here? Is God choosing people based on something? Is Jesus doing the same? Is he going to say, you and you're in this side here, you're not in, you're not chosen. And he uses this word very specifically because their image of the Jewish kind of literature and how it was taught, it was described that the Jews were the chosen people. Right? So Jesus is saying here that there are other people who are chosen, that are from this group, that does not include the Jews. The Jews are always invited. They were the first to be invited, and they will always be on this list. But are they ready, right? Or anybody else ready? So the choice of who is chosen is again our choice. We must choose to be in this big wedding party. And the party, of course, is our evolution, our progress, the way that we evolve morally, intellectually, to try to achieve higher and higher levels of purity towards that ultimate path or goal of near perfection. So Jesus was telling the story because he knew people at the time would understand, because they always like to have big parties. Weddings was a big celebration among the community, because it's a time where the whole community was invited. In many countries, if you take India and you go and hear stories about any of the small and not so small towns, when there's a wedding, and there's a wedding party, you don't need to send an invitation out. Everybody in the city, in the town, assumes they're invited, and they're going regardless of what you say, right? Unless you're a family feud or something, and you don't like that family. But there's this implicit understanding that the wedding is to celebrate the union of two people who are going to be part as a couple in the community. So all the community is invited to that celebration. And the same is in terms of a spiritual calling. Everybody is called. We all have a calling inside us. But are we going to choose that calling? Are we going to proceed and try to learn and see where we are? What are we prepared to do? What do we need to educate ourselves, learn? And then most importantly, learning is important, but more importantly is practicing. Because there is no real benefit in learning something if you're not willing to practice those things. And this comes back to us on the other parable I want to talk about, which is about the workers of the last hour, 11th hour, or maybe different things. It is next slide. Next. No more? Okay. So this chapter 20 has three main chapters. One is around the workers of the Lord, the workers of the last hour. The last shall be first in the mission of spiritists. So we'll start with the last one, which is the workers of the Lord. So again, Jesus talking to the followers, the people who were there, tell the story about this kind of landowner, right? That he has, he needs to have workers to come in and work the land for him. So if we go to the next slide. And the gospel always starts like this. The kingdom of heaven is like. Right? We saw this in the other parable, right? The kingdom is like a king. Here it's like a father of a family. And they were day workers. So they were not servants that always worked with the family or the father. These were kind of periodic workers, migrants, who would go to property, farm to farm, especially during the harvest, to work, or even in the early days, to clean up the fields, to do all of the stuff that you need to do in agriculture, all the way up to the harvest itself. But this is not something you have to do every single day. You have to do it at certain times. So it was not uncommon at the time that they would hire people on a day-to-day basis. And I know even in Brazil, I remember seeing a few years ago, I'm not sure if it's still there, in the docks. So for some reason, I was in Rio and I was driving past the docks, and then there was this large number of men, mostly men, kind of in a lineup. And I asked, I think it was my grandfather at the time, to say, what are these people doing here? I said, so they get hired, right? Because a ship has come in and they have to go there and help unload the ship, right? And they keep doing this. I'm sure now it has evolved. Maybe there are companies that organize it. But at the time was not different than this. They had to kind of, I won't say fight, but they had to position themselves. So obviously the stronger a man would be called first and so forth, right? So I was trying to hire the people who are going to be more productive and is going to unload more and more on the ship faster. So here, same thing, 2,000 years ago was not unlike that. And we still see this, you're going to see some pictures happen even today in the US with some of the migrant workers. Yeah, I think here is a little more organized because you have to bring it through companies and so forth. But in any case, the idea is that there are some aspects of, especially laborers, where they're almost hired on a daily basis. And this is how the story starts. So next slide. So every day they negotiate a price, right? So at the time of this story, or maybe it was the current price at the time of Jesus, we can't tell, that they would get 1 denarius per day. The workers who are being called looked at it and says, sure, I can work 1 day for this new vineyard. So that's great. Next slide. So this was in the first hour. So in the time, first hour would have been 6 or 7 in the morning, right? Then, the family father realized, well, didn't get enough. There weren't enough there for me to call. So I'm going to have to go back to where I was, where I get these people, and I'm going to call them again. Please come. I want you to work in my vineyard. So this was already in the 3rd hour. So now it could be like 9 o'clock in the morning. So, and the family father says, you go also to my vineyard, and I will give you what is reasonable. So he didn't set a price. So, but still, workers are there. They needed to work that day. He says, sure, we'll go, right? And next slide. And this repeats the 6th cycle, 9th cycle. So we're going into like late mid-afternoon, right? And he kept doing this until he came to the 11th hour. And he still found finally men waiting to be hired. And then he said to them, why have you stood around all day without working? I've been coming here, I've been calling, why are you still here and haven't been hired to do the job? Next slide. They told him, because nobody hired me. Right? I might have been here, I might have been in different places, and I wasn't hired. Everybody else was hired. The father looked at them and realized, okay, I can see that happening. And says, okay, guys, come to the vineyard. I'm going to hire everyone. So everybody goes, everybody's working in the vineyards, maybe picking the grapes if this is the harvest season, and working very strongly. So what happens at the end of the day? The workers finish, brush the dust out of their clothes, and they line up, right? But the father asks something interesting. He says, I want you to line up in the reverse order that I hired you. So those who are in the 11th hour, the last ones that I brought in, you come first. And then the 9th hour, the 6th hour, 3rd hour, all the way back to the folks that I hired you first, right? So what happened is he started paying everybody. And interesting enough, he was paying the same one denarius for each person. And of course, they were very happy because that's what they expected to receive for a day's work, even though some of them did not do a full day's work. Remember, they were brought in at different times during the day. So we're waiting for the last group. And who's the last group? Is the ones who were called in first, right? Next slide. Next. Okay. So now we are left with just the group that was hired first. And they were there excited about it because they said, oh, great, I'm going to get more because these guys who didn't work the whole day got the one denarius. I must deserve something more. But when it came their turn, what did they get? The same one denarius. And they complained. They weren't happy, right? And they started pointing to the other workers who already received payment. It says, those who only work 1 hour. And who are those? Those are the workers of the 11th hour. Got the one denarius. And you made them equal to us who are here for 12 hours. That is not fair. We want more money, right? And we bore the load. We were here in the early morning, midday, afternoon. We were there caring, doing a lot of the work that these guys only came in to finish. If you think economically, this is how we work today in the material world. You get paid per hour. If you work more hours, you get more money, right? That's the kind of agreement that was made. But this was not the agreement that this father did in this story, right? He said he was going to pay one denarius for the whole day's work. So the landowner, father of the family, he was kind of, I would say, not upset, but he was not going to buy this idea, right? So he took one of them, who was probably the guy who was leading this kind of revolt against him, and said, my friend, I have done you no wrong. Didn't you agree to work for one denarius? Take this money and go. That's what we agreed. Don't come back and complain to me. And as for me, I wish to give to the last as much as to you. Is it not permitted for me to do what I want? Right? It's his money. He's giving it out. He could have given 3 denarius because he liked somebody, right? He might have been part of the 11th hour, but he didn't. He gave everyone the same pay. Then the best part is the last part. It says, and by the way, is your eye evil because I'm good? So the fact that I'm good and giving money to everyone makes you angry and evil? You want me to pay them less? Is that what you think? So what's Jesus talking about here? Right? Who is the family father? It could be God, it could be Jesus himself, right? Calling us to work in the fields of the Lord. And what is he promising us? Everyone. What is promising us? Kind of a fantastic future. Heaven, if you want to call it that way. But a place where we are always happy and joyful and we have a ball. That's the promise. No more, no less. So does it matter who came first to that joy? Why should they be paid more or less? Well, in some ways, they're being paid a little bit more. Because those who went on this journey, went on this spiritual calling first, what happened to them? They got there first. And they're reaping all of the benefits before anybody else. And once they get there, they realize that their spiritual calling is to help others get there too. So they are benefiting from all of this wisdom, all of this proximity to God and to Jesus, and all of the benefits that we're going to get, we, the workers of the 11th hour, that we haven't gotten there yet. Right? So it's like going into a kind of amusement park and being the first ones in the amusement park, like 5 o'clock in the morning, and you have the whole park for yourself. And you can start going on all of the rides, eating all of the food, and enjoying all of the amenities before the crowd comes in. And of course, in the spiritual world, our reward is quite different. Right? Our reward is love. Our reward is being able to be merciful, to understand the importance of our actions. So everybody who starts in that spiritual journey, based on a spiritual calling, they're getting closer to closer. But this is not an all or nothing. Like this, obviously, a story that has to be parable in terms of earthly scriptures. Our journey is long. We don't know how long. Maybe thousands of years. But at each step, we're achieving more and more. And it doesn't matter when we first come in. It doesn't matter who comes after us or who was there before. We will get all the same rewards. And when I said that those who came first were a little bit more, benefit a little bit more, is because let's say it's somebody in Jesus' time, and he was hearing the story, they started in that, they follow that spiritual calling, and they really progress very quickly, right? They're 2,000 years ahead of us. That's just a blink in eternity, folks. Because we're talking about forever in terms of the rewards we're going to get. So those 2,000 years will seem like a blink in the eye. So this family father is, of course, Jesus, right? God, right? They're calling us to come in this journey, to work in those fields. Those fields meaning this physical world. And how do we work? Go back to what I was saying before, me sitting here. How am I participating in this? Well, we're here trying to find new friends, trying to share what we have learned, hear from you, your experiences, your desires, your anguish, explaining why we have them. Why do we suffer in this existence? Because, yes, we all suffer. There's not a single soul that has come to earth and not suffered something. Some suffer more than others. Some suffer different types of anguishes, challenges in their lives. But maybe my spiritual calling is just to listen, to learn and share. Hoping that these words can make a small little change in your life. Then again, this is up to you. But more importantly, my spiritual awakening is to learn these lessons myself and make the difference, make the change in how I live, how I make my choices, how I treat not just the persons in my family, my friends, because we always tend to treat them good. Families, there's always a little bit of conflicts at any time, because that's what families do. But, we always like their friends, we always treat them well. It's treating the people we don't like differently. Treating the people we never met and are meeting and interacting with strangers. Thinking about the choices we make in our lives. Because we have to at one point realize that none of our material stuff will come with us when we take that journey back to the spiritual world. And this is an awakening because it does change the way that you perceive things, how you think about it. Doesn't mean that it's perfect. We are not perfect. So we still have our own desires, or greed, or selfishness. We're we're nowhere near taking these vices out of our existence. It's just where we are in this journey. And we know that the planet is evolving, and a lot of everyone in this planet is within kind of a very short range of those moral actions and moral understanding. So what we hear is moving very little baby steps. One phrase, one lecture can make people think a little bit more. And that begins your spiritual calling. Does that mean that everyone here has to come and be doing lectures like I did? No. You will find your own way. Doing charity work. Working for some kind of a political action, if you think those actions will improve the lives of people. Try not to harm, offend, humiliate, or actually even steal for those who are less fortunate than yourself. And the stealing is not necessarily going out and taking the money of their wallet if they have them, but creating conditions for them to continue to be inferior in your eyes. Making life difficult for them, revenge, anger, all of the things that we need to fix in ourselves. The spiritual calling is to learn first, practice second, and teach third. Because if we don't evolve together, we're in trouble. Because the world, this planet, has to evolve together. Not everyone will make it. And we know that some people, some spirits, might not be asked to return if they really haven't learned or not willing to learn the lesson. And this is what, next slide. The last shall be first, and the first shall be last. For many are called, but few are chosen. Right? Doesn't make sense, right? It's plain words. The last will be first, the first will be last, and so forth. But if you're looking for a reward, material reward, and you're in the front of the line, demanding that reward, spiritually you'll be the last. Because those who are more aware and can hear that calling more clearly, they will be the firsts. They will be the first to get the reward from our evolution, from the way that we proceed. Next slide. So now we're into the spiritists, talking about us, about spiritists. And they say, good spiritists, my dearly beloved, you are all workers of the last hour. So if anybody had a doubt here, in which of those hours we're in, no more doubt. We're the guys who got the money, the denarius, full denarius, for only doing much sooner or much smaller work. Because there were a lot of people who came before us. We build upon their lessons, their struggles, their sacrifices that came before. So the spirits continue. The one who says, I begin work at daybreak and I will finish only at nightfall, will be very proud. You all came when you were called. And that's the spiritual calling I was talking about. Some a little earlier, some a little later. To the incarnation whose shackles you bear. So every incarnation we have shackles. And what are the shackles? It's all of the debts were accumulated to the previous lives. However, for how many centuries has the Lord been calling you to his vineyards without you wanting to enter it? So you might think, well, this is one of my first lives, my first incarnations, and I'm following Spiritism, so I must be one of the early, we've been around for a long time. And now we're getting to the point that we're kind of want to be serious. Serious about understanding first, learning, right? Reading, listening, trying to make sense of our existence. Why has God created us? Why are we here? Are we just specks of dust who will come and then disappear? I don't believe that. It wouldn't make sense to create such an immense universe by chance, and statistically we're just that one planet that got all of the conditions right to have life. To have life that evolved to human beings. To have life that can think, that can make decisions, that can understand what morality is. Right? A lot of animals can think. A lot of animals can learn. A lot of them are intelligent in that way. But they don't have any moral bearings. If a lion is hungry or threatened, they will kill. They will kill other lions, they will kill other animals, they will do what their instinct tells them to do. Some of them are smart, some of them can use tools. I know ravens are fairly intelligent birds. Right? They can actually learn how to use two tools to do two things to accomplish one goal. That's quite a thing if we think for a bird that has such a small brain. But we're here. We're not like them in a sense, but we have something else. We have our spirit. Our spirit that is challenged to learn about our moral direction and our evolution. And to that point, for those who are spiritists now, you have an obligation to learn and practice, to improve yourself while improving others, helping others, being charitable, loving, being ready to stand a hand to those who are in need. So we continue this text, and I'll say who gave us this. So next slide. Now is the time for you to receive your wages. Employ the time you have remaining well. And never forget that your existence, no matter how long it may seem to you, is only a fleeting instance of the immensity of time, comprising eternity to you. This was given to us by the Spirit of Constantine. It was uniquely and the only one who is described as a protector spirit in 1863, a protector spirit. It's protecting us. It's protecting us in the sense of trying to give us clarity in our direction and our goal, what we need to achieve. Next slide. He continues in other areas we see as the last will rise, spiritists profit from the intellectual endeavors of his predecessors, because humans must inherit from humans, and their endeavors and results are collective. God blesses solidarity. So as the ones who came before us shared and recorded their experience, their learnings, their teachings, their best practices. If you may, we learn from them, so we don't have to go through the same years. Many do, but we don't have to. Next slide. So this is from, I love this picture, it's called The Tree of Reincarnation by Michal Shalal. And in this test here that comes along, he says reincarnation, that wonderful tenet, both immortalizes and defines spiritual affiliation. The spirit understands the continuity of the task, interrupted but always resumed again. Interrupted by what? By death. This is what interrupts, but then we resume it. And all workers of the first and last hour, with their eyes open to the profound justice of God, no longer complain, but simply worship. Next slide. This is one of the true meanings of this parable. Like all the parables that Jesus addresses the people beneath its formed images, it contains the seed of the future as well as the revelation of that magnificent unity that harmonizes all things in the universe. And that solidarity that reconnects our present beings to the past and to the future. That is the Ronnie Peng 1863 as well. So we have much to think about, to contemplate. What is our spiritual calling? What is the direction we need to do? So those who are here or distance, you may or may not be spiritists. But for the spiritists, we get a more clearly defined mission. Next slide. The time is near for the fulfillment of those things proclaimed for the transformation of humankind. Blessed will be those who have worked in the Lord's fields selflessly and with no other motive than charity. Next slide. God is taking census of his faithful servants. Remember, the wedding party. And is taking notes of those who only have the appearance of devotion, so that they may not usurp the wages of the courageous servants. So this is referring back to a section that I did not discuss, which is those who, just because you proclaim Lord, 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 doesn't mean you make it to heaven, because it's not about what you say, but it's what you do, what you practice. Because it is for those who do not recoil before the tasks that God will entrust the most difficult positions in the great work of regeneration through Spiritism. And these words will be fulfilled. The first will be the last, and the last will be the first in the kingdom of heaven. So that's where I'll stop. We'll continue exploring these topics in almost every lecture that we have here, because it is a profound foundation of what Spiritism is teaching us, what we're practicing. It's that spiritual calling that gives us the kind of the path to follow. It's a lot of learning. There's a lot for us to change in ourselves. But don't distress if you can't do it right away. It takes time. We know. Be gentle to yourself, but never forget where you want to go. Because with persistence and with love, we'll all get there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for everybody who is here today. And we have a new way of asking questions for those who don't feel comfortable asking questions. We have a little box on the side there. You can ask a question and can put inside the box. But for those who are here today that wants to ask questions, it's open too, or make a comment.
Don't be embarrassed. Every question is a good question.
Well, feel like.
The only thing, we don't have the key to open the box.
Oh, yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
a secret box.
It's
Yeah.
a secret box. Rafael got the key. And is there any questions or anything from the internet?
Yes, so we have a couple of questions, and they're both from Leonardo. He's watching us on YouTube. First one, he says, when can the spiritual calling happen? On earth or when we are in the spirit form, most evolved place? It seems that to listen the calling is easier there than here, since the trade-offs are clear.
Okay. Can you repeat the question?
Yes. So the question is, if we understand that our existence switches back between the material and the spiritual world, is it easier for us to get that spiritual calling in the spiritual world or in the material world? Okay, obviously we learn in both realms. We learn while we're here, we learn while we're there. So that spiritual calling can come at any place. But if we're now talking about here, this life, this reincarnation that we need, remember that there is a veil of forgiveness that we have between incarnated lives. And that includes what happened to us in the spiritual world as well. So when we are reincarnated, and we don't remember our previous lives for obvious reasons, because we don't want to know how bad we were in our life. But also, we don't expressly remember our period of existence in the spiritual world. That doesn't mean that whatever we learned that is somehow not baked into our reincarnation, that we don't carry this. So that's why I explained that we have this calling within us to become and follow this spiritual path. So that internal thing inside us is very well could be things that we learned in the spiritual world or things we learned in previous incarnations. We carry that kind of, let's call it a sixth sense or something like this. We don't remember clearly, we don't know how it's coming. Somehow, deep down, you know it's the right thing that you should be doing. So that could very well be in, I would say, just the same. We could learn it in both because we're the same person. We have the same experiences all along. Just because we're going back to the spiritual world, it doesn't mean that suddenly the veil of forgiveness is cleared for all of our previous lives. So we are very protected through all of these transitions. This is why it's important that we have the protector spirit talking to us. This is a concept that we are only allowed to know things that will help us progress, right? And all the things that could bring us down, bring us into depression, bring us into total desolation, there's no point in us being kind of exposed over and over to that. But a very good question.
Yeah.
And there's a second question here from Leonard as well, Leonardo. How is our calling related to our reincarnation plan?
So the question is, how is this calling related to our reincarnation plan? For those who are new to Spiritism, reincarnation plan is related to the fact that we do reincarnate. That after each incarnate or each life, we go back to the spiritual world, we spend a certain amount of time in there. And then before we come back to reincarnate, our guiding spirits help us kind of prepare a plan. It doesn't mean it's a prescription that we're going to exactly like this, but it is kind of our goals for the new life. Imagine like a student and a teacher getting together before the beginning of the school year, and the teacher explaining all of the things that the student is supposed to learn. If it learns 80%, maybe that's a minus, right? So absolutely, this spiritual calling is inherent in everything that we do in terms of reincarnation plan, because everything has to do with the fact that we need to evolve spiritually. Will it say you will get that real calling and you're going to start working? No. But it will say you are prepared, and if you're willing, if you make a decision that this is not the right time, then this life could be the one that really takes you to that journey.
And we have to remember that in this lifetime, we have all the tools that we need to whatever reincarnation plane we have. And when I say tools is, like having the eyesight, the body, the physical body that is able to walk, having the knowledge, the study to understand things, and having sometimes the family around us that will support us to do whatever we need to support. So these are the tools that we have. We don't know how the next life, how we're gonna, this plan is going to be for the next life. Maybe the next life, I won't have whatever I have in this lifetime to make this plan possible. So it's not to wait for the next life to do whatever you need to be done in this lifetime. That you know, because sometimes we don't even know what is expected from us. So whatever you know that's expected, act on it. Teresa, one more question?
No, I just want to make a comment on what you're saying. I think it's because in Spiritism, we always talk about reincarnatory plan. And then I think we all sometimes leave waiting for that plan to show up. I said, oh, all of a sudden, I'm going to find out what I have to do. And the plan's the whole thing. Is how we deal with our family members, how we deal with the friends, even the type of job that are more prone to. Some people are more prone to go to the, medicine side. Some people are more prone to injury. Like even what directs us, how we deal with our coworkers. That is the whole reincarnatory plan. It's how we deal with everybody. And then sometimes we spend a whole life waiting for this plan that I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Well, you had your whole family to practice the plan. You had your friends to practice the plan. You had your co-workers, the stranger on the street. Joe today was talking about like doing charity. The society is here. This is our plan, right? But we keep waiting for that written contract that says this is what should be, right? And the plan's here.
I think folks can hear what you're saying.
I'm not sure. I was saying to Joe, it's located.
No, they can because the Facebook is showing the automatic
Perfect,
subtitles.
perfect.
Yeah.
So we don't have to repeat, but it's very well said. It
Yeah.
is very well said. So,
All the resources
thank you so
are
much
around
for
us.
everybody. Thank you, Joe, for being here today and helping us. I'm sure we all gonna have all these reflections to be done over the week, hopefully. And hopefully we may start something new.
I didn't mention who actually wrote these last couple of slides.
All this future tour. Yes. So thank you so much. We are going now to say goodbye to our viewers from the internet. Thank you so much for being here with us today. And we are now closing. Hopefully I'll see you next week. Okay? And now I want to invite, who's going to